Hi, my name is Larry Harlow. They call me the Judío Maravilloso, the marvelous Jew. And I'm a band leader, a salsa pianist. I've been doing it for about 45 years. And everybody's kind of interested in how come a nice American Jewish guy like you is playing Latin music. Well, it's a very long story, but I'll try and make it as quick as I can. I come from a whole family of musicians. My father is a bassist and a vocalist, and my mother was a singer, and his brothers were violin players and accordion players and comedians and actors, and even my great-grandfather was a piano player for the silent movies. So I come from a long line of show people, and I went to a special school called Music and Art High School here in Manhattan, which was located on 137th Street and Convent Avenue, which is in the middle of Spanish Harlem. And as I went to school, I used to drive an hour on the half hour on the bus, an hour on the subway, all the way to get up to Harlem. And I would come out of the subway and hear all this music coming out of the bodegas and the mom and pop record stores. And I found the music fascinating because it had some great rhythms. I always wanted to be a jazz player, but of course I was not African American and I was not an intravenous drug user. So in the 1950s, those were the requirements to be a jazz player. So the closest kind of music where I could improvise and still, get off playing was playing Latin music. So I started out with African American musicians that were playing Latin American music, and we started playing Cuban stocks, and they took me into the band because they knew how to read music. And I really wasn't very good in the beginning, and they fired me a couple of times, and I felt really bad about it. And I went to the closest record store, and I bought a Nora Morales album and a Joe Loco album, two really good Latin pianists, and I memorized all their solos, and I went to the next rehearsal, and then I just rattled off some great solos, and they thought it was me, but it was really Joe Loco solo. But little by little I learned how clave fit in Latin music and how the whole thing worked, and it was really very mathematical and very, very musical. And once I understood that, it got a lot easier. My graduation from high school, after my graduation from high school, my first year in college, I took a vacation in 1956 to Havana, a Christmas vacation with a bunch of American Jewish guys that were called Mambo Nicks. And we were the guys that used to follow the mambo bands around New York City and learn how to dance because the Latin girls look so pretty. We used to follow them around so we can get close to the Latin girls. We used to hang out in the Palladium in New York City and listen to all the good bands that came from Cuba. They came from Puerto Rico, Tito Puente, Machito, Tito Rodriguez, and et cetera, et cetera. And finally, I came back after that Christmas vacation. When I stopped off, when I got to Havana, I got off the plane. I was like in paradise. There was a band playing on every corner. There was Aragon over here, and there was Benny Moré over here, and there was Melodías de Cuarenta over here, and then there was, Conjunto Casino on the other corner. It was just marvelous. There was music, free music everywhere. All the bodegas had little trovas, little trios, little quartetos, sextetos, septetos, black and white TV, had live audiences every day. It was free. And under the Batista regime, everything seemed to be going good until Fidel Castro came around and started hearing the bombs exploding. I stayed for about 2 years, the second trip down, and enrolled in the University of Havana in the music department, where I met a lot of great musicians and got to know a lot of the professional musicians, who kind of took me under their wing and let me go on a bus with them to the different provinces where they played, and gained a lot of experience and a lot of know-how that you can't learn in books. And when I came back, when Fidel entered Havana in 1959, I decided to leave and came back to the States and started playing with a bunch of little bands up in the Catskill Mountains, which was like going to school. It was about an hour and a half north of New York City. And Charlie Palmieri had a band in one hotel, Eddie Palmieri, Tito Puente, and another, Joe Cuban, and another. So we were all up there playing as rumba bands, what they called rumba bands at the time. We were the relief orchestras. We didn't play the shows, but we played for dancing afterwards. And the Jewish people in New York City kind of supported Latin music because they knew how to cha-cha and they knew how to mambo. And they would take mambo lessons and go to dance schools and Arthur Murray Dance Academy and learn how to do all the Latin American dances. And we, on the other hand, when the music got cut off from Cuba, were very frustrated because we were really Afro-Cuban music people. We followed the son montuno, and the music from Cuba at that time was really very simple. They were very simple chordal structures, simple arrangements, simple lyrics. 1, 2, 3, together, 1, 2, 3, stuff like that. And everybody used to come to my hotel because it was the late spot. So we used to have these improvisational descarga sessions. We just used to jam away and invent new things to play and new songs to play, and the harmonies went from 6th and 7th chords to 9ths and 11ths, and augmented 13ths, and the songs took on real song forms. You must remember that in the 60s was a time of revolution here in the United States. The Civil Rights Movement, Vietnam, the Young Lords, the Black Panthers, the Beatle invasion of the United States too. So it was a time of revolution. So everything was in a flux in this transitional period. And what the Latin musicians did here, they started their own form of Latin music. It was many years later that they gave it the name salsa. But really what salsa, Tito Puente used to say, salsa, I'd put that on my spaghetti. But salsa is just a word. It's a combination of good Afro-Cuban music mixed with a little New York bebop and, little New York know-how and, and a little modernized from the old-time Cuban music. And they started to write real songs about humanity, songs about love, songs about politics. And the newly arrived Hispanics in New York City took that as their own. This is our music, and wherever we played, they would come. And there was a really boom of about maybe 30 or 40 Latin bands just popped up all about the same time in the early 60s, and they started playing great Latin music, and then more clubs started opening up. At one time, there were about 300 clubs around the New York City tri-state area, and we had plenty of places to play. And when the bands got up to play, they went up to kill each other. I mean, we went out to, let's top this band, let's top that band. And it was a friendly competition, but it was very educational and very rewarding. So the Hispanics really embraced this music, and they gave it the name salsa. I don't really know where the word came from. It could have come from a Venezuelan radio program called Échale Salsita, or it could have come from Izzy Zanabria's TV show called Salsa, but the word stuck. And 1964, I had this sound in my head. I wanted to do a band with trumpets and trombones. Nobody had done that before. And I figured by adding the trombones with the trumpets, you had another layer of counterpoint. So the piano and bass would play a line, the trombones would play a counterpoint line to that, and the trumpets another counterpoint line on top of that. So we had another layer to work with. And it was very successful. I had a very swinging band. I'm lucky I had a couple of guys that played trumpets and trombones and double violins, so I could play charanga music as well as conjunto music at the same time. And the top 10 bands worked all the time. This record company called Fania sprung up in 1964, and I was one of the first guys to sign with this newly arrived company headed by Jerry Masucci and Johnny Pacheco, who were partners. And then with the invention of FM radio in New York had a big impact upon record sales. And then they signed Bobby Valentine, and then Willie Colon, and then Ray Barretto, etc., 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 and the rest is history. Then I had an idea to put together the leaders of all the groups and do a concert in New York City. We didn't know where we were going to do it. First it was going to be at the Fillmore, and then that closed, and then Central Park, we couldn't get a license, and we wound up doing it at the Cheetah in New York City, which was owned by Ralph Mercado at the time. And we did the famous Fania All-Stars Live at the Cheetah, which went on to become a wonderful movie, which I co-produced with Jerry Masucci, directed by Leon Gast, and I edited it with blade editing. Like 4 of us spent a year just really learning how to do blade edits, because it's way before videotape. So we recorded in 16mm film with 5 cameras, and we kind of did it all ourselves by trial and error. The most important thing about this film is that it opened the doors to new markets for us. It spread salsa consciousness throughout South America. It started in New York, Miami, Chicago, Los Angeles, Puerto Rico, and then branched to Panama, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and then later on to Europe and Japan. It just broadened our markets. Our record sales went from 20,000 to 120,000, and all the artists were selling very well. Fania was like kind of compared to like the Latino Motown. We were knocking them out, cranking out a record a week. That means 50 releases a year or something like that. Then Jerry got really smart and he bought his own radio stations, and all he played was Fania music on the radio stations. So if you force it down the public's throat enough, they're going to buy it. and he was a very good businessman. Although some of his royalty practices of paying royalties were not legitimate. I don't think any of us got what we deserved all those years, but we didn't really care. We just cared more about the music and having fun and letting people dance, because when the dancers dance good, the musicians play better. When the musicians play better, the dancers dance better. So it's a trade-off. That's probably the secret of why salsa music is so good. I am having a renaissance right now in my career, probably because most of my peers have passed away. Ray Barreto's died, Tito Puentes died, Machitos died, Celia Cruz has died, Condi Rodriguez, Hector Lavoe, I can go on. And there's only a couple of us left, Eddie Palmieri and myself and Willie Colon and Pacheco are really just holding down the fort. And we're not getting any younger, but we're trying to compete and play and keep this beautiful art form alive so that the next generations can pass it down. Unfortunately, I don't see too many young teenage musicians that are playing salsa, or too many teenage singers. And it's really kind of like my mission in life to pass down the secrets of this genre to the next generation. So I'm trying to keep young guys, interested. There's a couple of really great music schools here in Los Angeles and Miami and in Puerto Rico that teach it as a core, Afro-Cuban music as a course in colleges. So there's some signs. Anyway, I had a great time playing in London. I want to thank Andy Wood. I want to thank all the guys for bringing us out. I want to thank the BBC. We did two really great, one radio broadcast for BBC Three, and we did Jules Holland's show on Tuesday night with The Who, my favorite group. Let me tell you about The Who. In 1973, Peter Townsend wrote Tommy. Tommy was the first concept album that I have ever heard, and it really, it just, it put me in another direction. And I wrote a Latin opera, kind of like based on Tommy, about a deaf and dumb and blind conga player. No songs were the same. It's just an idea of a concept having one song going into the next without 10 individual songs on an album. So it told a story. And I never got a chance to meet Peter Townsend. Or, they always compared the two pieces of music together in Stereo Review or in record magazines. But here I was walking through the hall of the BBC and come to face with Peter Townsend. And I had, Peter, can I talk to you for 5 seconds? And he remembered it from 1973, and he was very cordial and really very nice, and we had a really nice long conversation. And in the studio when he was recording, I mean, The Who were playing better than ever. I mean, my mouth was wide open for that whole half hour that they were performing. They're still great. Roger Daltrey's still looking good, sounding good, and it was a thrill to play with them on the same TV show, which should be on in a couple of weeks also, so if you can get it on the BBC network. And I want to thank everybody for being so nice to us in London, and I hope we'll be back real soon. Have a good time.